Hi, I'm Brenda, and welcome back to the channel. Today's letter comes from a woman who discovered a secret about her father that shattered everything she thought she knew about her family. It all started with an old desk and a journal that was never meant to be found. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. I receive letters every week with stories of betrayal, family secrets, and chilling revelations. Your comments help me decide which ones to read next. The woman behind today's story, we'll call her Claire, is 32 years old. Her father, Henry, passed away 3 months ago. He was a quiet man, a retired school principal, respected in their small town. To everyone, he seemed like a man who had lived an ordinary, honest life. Claire went to his old study one afternoon to sort through his belongings. The room was untouched, as if he had just stepped out for a moment. Dust motes floated in the sunlight through the blinds, and the smell of old paper and coffee lingered in the air. She started with the bookshelf, then moved to the large oak desk her father had always kept locked. She had found the small brass key in a drawer and felt a strange anticipation as she slid it into the lock. The top drawer opened easily, revealing neat stacks of envelopes, pens, and receipts. Nothing unusual, but when she tried the bottom drawer, it stuck slightly before opening with a groan. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, cracked with age. Claire hesitated, her fingers brushing over the worn cover. Her father had never mentioned keeping a journal. She carried it to the window for better light and slowly opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably his, but the words made her blood run cold. The very first line read, "If my family ever finds this, everything they think they know about me will change forever." Claire's hands trembled as she turned the page. Her father's handwriting, usually neat and measured, had moments of frantic slant, like he had written in fear. The first entry was dated 35 years ago, long before she was born. "I've made a mistake I can never undo. I thought I could leave that life behind, but it follows me. They'll never understand if they find out what I've done, or who I was." Claire's chest tightened as she read those words. She flipped to the next page, scanning for answers. The entries became more detailed, describing nights when he would drive to a small house in a neighboring town. He never mentioned names, only initials, and he wrote about a baby. "I held her tonight. She has her mother's eyes. I want to be in her life, but I can't. If Margaret ever found out, it would destroy everything." Claire froze. Margaret was her mother, which meant her father had another child. The journal continued, chronicling secret visits, hidden payments, and a growing sense of guilt. He had a second family, one he never told anyone about. Claire's heart pounded in her ears. She felt like the air in the study had been sucked out, but the entries didn't stop there. As the years passed, the tone of the journal shifted from guilty to fearful. He wrote about someone threatening him, someone who knew his secret and demanded money to keep. It hidden. Claire read the last line on the page. "If anything happens to me, check the old safety deposit box. The truth is there, and they will come for it if they know I'm gone." She snapped the journal shut, her mind spinning. Who were they? And what had her father gotten himself into that made him fear for his life, even after all these years? Claire sat frozen in her father's study, the weight of the journal heavy in her lap. Her father, the man she had idolized her whole life, had been living a double life. And now, even after death, he was pulling her into his secret world. Words about a safety deposit box echoed in her mind. She knew which bank her father had used, the same one where he'd opened accounts for each of the kids' college funds. But she'd never heard of any private boxes. That evening, she drove to the bank with the journal locked in her glove compartment. Her stomach twisted as she approached the counter. "I'm here to access my father's safety deposit box," she said, her voice shaking. The banker checked records, then nodded. Yes, Henry Thompson. We'll need proof of death and identification. Claire handed over the document she had brought just in case. Minutes later, she was led to a quiet room in the back. The small metal box was set on the table. Claire stared at it for a long moment, her hands trembling. She slipped the key the banker provided into the lock and opened the lid slowly, as if it might bite. Inside were several envelopes, a flash drive, and a single photograph face down. Claire picked up the photo first. When she turned it over, her breath caught. It was her father, standing in front of a house she didn't recognize, holding a baby she had never seen. She opened the first envelope. Inside were birth certificates, 3 of them for children she didn't know. Her father hadn't had one secret child. He'd had a second family, entirely hidden, living just a few towns over. Her hands shook harder as she picked up the flash drive. Taped to it was a note in her father's handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm sorry, but now they'll come for you too. Claire stared at the flash drive in her palm, her pulse racing. Her father's warning echoed in her head. Now they'll come for you too. She didn't even know who they were, but she already felt the weight of invisible eyes on her. She waited until she got home before plugging the flash drive into her laptop. For a moment, she hesitated, half expecting the screen to flicker or some security measure to trigger. But a single folder appeared, labeled with the word insurance. Inside were dozens of scanned documents, photographs, and video files. Claire opened the first photo and felt her stomach flip. It showed her father in a suit, shaking hands with a man she didn't recognize, but the background was clear. A private airstrip. The videos were worse. In one, her father spoke directly into the camera, his voice low and urgent. If you're watching this, then I didn't make it. I tried to protect all of you, but the truth is bigger than me. I know too much about them. The more she clicked through, the more disturbing the content became. There were receipts for large cash withdrawals, records of secret property transfers, and photographs of men who looked dangerous, all linked to her father's second family. Claire began to piece it together. Her father hadn't just been hiding a double life, he had been involved with something criminal. The journal's cryptic entries, the hidden family, the threats, it all pointed to a network of people who wouldn't want their secrets exposed. Final file was a scanned police report from 20 years ago, marked closed, unsolved. It was a missing persons case for a man with the same last name. As the mother of her father's hidden children, Claire's blood ran cold. Her father hadn't just been leading a double life. Someone had disappeared because of it, and he had been living in fear ever since. Claire sat frozen at her desk, the laptop screen glowing in the dark room. The files from the flash drive blurred before her eyes as a creeping dread settled in. Her father's warning suddenly felt very real. Someone could be watching her. Even now, a faint sound outside made her jump. It was subtle, like a car door closing or footsteps on gravel. Her house was isolated enough that any unexpected noise stood out. She crept to the window, heart hammering, and peeked through the blinds. At the edge of the street, a black SUV idled with its lights off. Claire's breath caught. She didn't recognize the car, and it didn't belong to any neighbor. She quickly shut her laptop and turned off the desk lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She crouched near the window, watching the SUV. Minutes crawled by, and just as she began to wonder if she was imagining things, the vehicle slowly rolled away into the night. She backed away from the window, every instinct screaming that this was no coincidence. The journal, the flash drive, the missing man. Someone didn't want these secrets uncovered. Her father's fear wasn't paranoia. It had been a warning passed to her. Claire tried to steady her breathing and think. She knew she couldn't stay home alone. If they had found her this quickly, She needed help, and she needed it fast. But who could she trust? She didn't even know the full scope of what her father had been involved in. She glanced at the journal again, then back at the flash drive. There was more to uncover, but every instinct told her to move, to get somewhere safe before it was too late. In that moment, she realized the truth. Her father's secret life hadn't died with him. It had just become her problem, and if she wasn't careful, it could cost her everything. Claire shoved the journal and flash drive into her bag, her hands trembling as she grabbed her car keys. Every instinct screamed at her to leave the house. She didn't even bother locking the door. If someone wanted to get in, they already could. The night air was cold against her skin as she sprinted to her car. Her eyes darted to the street, half expecting the black SUV to return. The quiet was suffocating, broken only by the rapid thud of her heartbeat. She started the engine and pulled away slowly at first, then pressed the gas harder once she hit the main road. Her father's warnings echoed in her head. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. Now they'll come for you too. The roads were empty, the town asleep, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every pair of headlights in the distance felt like a predator lurking in the dark. She gripped the wheel tighter and kept checking her mirrors. After 20 minutes of driving aimlessly, she spotted the glow of a 24-hour diner. Relief washed over her. She pulled into the lot and parked near the entrance, choosing a spot under the bright security lights. Inside, the diner was nearly empty. A single trucker nursed a coffee in the corner, and a young waitress wiped down the counter. Claire slid into a booth with her back against the wall, scanning the windows for any sign of the SUV. She opened her bag, pulling out the journal, and stared at it as if it could answer all her questions. Her father's double life, the missing man, the threats, everything was tangled together. She needed to know more, but fear gnawed at her gut. Then, as she reached for the flash drive again, headlights swept across the diner's front window. A black SUV rolled slowly into the parking lot. Claire froze in the booth, her fingers tightening around the flash drive. The diner's neon lights reflected off the black SUV as it idled in the parking lot. It was the same vehicle, she was sure of it. Her pulse roared in her ears. She slid down in her seat, hoping the low booth wall would hide her. The waitress glanced toward the window, then back at Claire. "You okay?" she asked softly. Claire nodded stiffly, but her voice caught in her throat. The SUV's engine cut off. A door opened with a muffled thud. Through the glass, Claire saw a dark figure step out, tall and broad-shouldered, moving slowly toward the diner. Every nerve in her body screamed to run, but her legs refused to move. The bell over door jingled as the man walked in. He wore a baseball cap pulled low and a dark jacket. His eyes swept the room casually, but Claire felt them linger on her booth for a fraction too long. He didn't approach immediately. Instead, he took a stool at the counter and ordered coffee. But his reflection in the chrome napkin holder angled toward Claire, watching her without watching her. Claire's hand trembled as she fumbled for her phone, only to see the screen dim battery at 4%. She had no one she trusted to call in the middle of the night, even the police. What could she say without sounding paranoid? The waitress refilled the man's coffee, unaware of the tension that crackled through the air. Claire's thoughts spun. If this man was connected to her father's secret life, he already knew she had the journal. She couldn't risk letting him follow her. With her heart in her throat, Claire made a decision. She grabbed her bag, kept her head low, and slipped out the side exit of the diner into the cold night street, into the darkness behind the building. The cold night air hit Claire like a slap as she slipped out the diner's side door. Her shoes crunched softly on the gravel as she ducked into the shadows behind the building. The hum of the SUV's engine and the distant clink of dishes inside. The diner were the only sounds she heard. her pulse hammered in her ears. She crouched low and peeked around the corner, catching a glimpse of the man still at the counter. But her relief was short-lived. Another figure stepped out of the SUV, scanning the dark lot. There were two of them. Claire clutched her bag too. Her chest, the journal and flash drive inside, feeling heavier than ever. She crept along the edge of the alley, moving toward the back of the parking lot where the streetlights faded. Every step felt like it echoed. Suddenly, the diner door jingled again. The man at the counter had left his stool. Claire heard a faint voice. "She's gone." Her stomach twisted. She ran. Her feet pounded the pavement as she bolted across the empty street, lungs burning with cold air. Behind her, heavy footsteps and the roar of the SUV's engine shattered the silence. They knew she was running, and they weren't far behind. She darted into a side street lined with dark houses, praying for a light, a sign of life, anything. Instead, the world felt deserted. Even the dogs were silent. A single porch light flickered. In the distance, her only beacon. As the SUV's headlights swept the corner, Claire ducked behind a hedge, heart threatening to burst. The men's voices carried on the wind, low and angry. "Find her, she has it." Claire pressed a hand over her mouth, fighting to steady her breath. The night around her felt alive with danger. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just about her father's secret. If they caught her, she wouldn't be going home. Claire stayed crouched behind the hedge, her entire body trembling. The black SUV crept slowly down the street, its headlights sweeping over yards and porches like a predator searching for prey. Every instinct told her to run, but she forced herself to stay still. When the SUV turned the corner, disappearing momentarily from sight, she seized her chance. She sprinted across the lawn of the nearest house and climbed the steps to the porch, pounding on the door with shaking fists. Porch light flicked on, and an elderly woman peered through the window, her face etched with suspicion. Claire pressed her face to the glass. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Someone is after me. I need to call the police." The door opened a crack, and the woman hesitated, looking past Claire to the dark street. Finally, she nodded and let her inside. Claire stumbled into the living room, heart pounding, as the woman handed her a landline phone. With trembling fingers, Claire dialed 911 and whispered urgently to the operator. "They're following me. They know I have something they want. Please send help." She gave the address, her eyes darting to the window every few seconds. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night. Relief washed over Claire, but it was short-lived. Through the window, she saw the SUV speeding away, its taillights disappearing into the darkness. Whoever they were, they wouldn't risk the police. When the officers arrived, Claire handed them the journal and the flash drive. "My father left me this," she said, her voice steadying as adrenaline gave way to determination. "It's the reason they're after me, and it's the reason my father lived in fear." In that moment, Claire knew there was no turning back. To survive and finally uncover the truth, she would have to expose everything her father had tried to bury, no matter how dark it was. At the police station, Claire sat in a small interview room, still wrapped in the blanket the elderly woman had given her. The journal and flash drive were on the table, surrounded by detectives flipping through pages and typing rapidly on laptops. One detective, a tall man with sharp features, finally looked up. "Claire, do you realize what your father was involved in?" His tone was careful, almost hesitant, as if the truth was too heavy to drop all at once. Claire shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I just thought he had another family. I didn't know it was more than that." The detective leaned forward. "Your father wasn't just living a double life. He was a key witness in an organized crime case 20 years ago. He never testified, but he knew too much. That's why he disappeared into his quiet life and why he left all this behind." The flash drive contained scanned contracts, coded messages, and photos that tied powerful people in the state to illegal operations, money laundering, missing persons, and suspected homicides. Her father had been documenting everything in case someone came after him. Claire's stomach twisted as the reality sank in. Her father had spent decades in silent fear, trapped between protecting his secret family and protecting the one she grew up in. And now, by opening that journal, she had inherited his danger. "We're putting you in protective custody," the detective said firmly. "Whoever was in that SUV won't stop until they're sure the evidence is gone. But now, it's safe. And soon they won't be." Claire exhaled shakily, a strange mix of relief and dread washing over her. She thought about her father's words, his guilt, his warnings. For the first time, she understood the depth of his silence and the weight of the legacy he left behind. The safe house was quiet, almost too quiet, as Claire lay awake staring at the ceiling. The hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of the walls were her only companions. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be hunted. Her mind kept replaying the last weeks, her father's funeral, the hidden journal, the black SUV, the diner, the alley. Every moment felt like a warning she had ignored until it was almost too late. Detectives visited her daily, briefing her on the case. They had already issued warrants based on the evidence her father left behind. The flash drive and journal contained names, judges, businessmen, and even a retired police officer, people she had grown up thinking were pillars of the community. One afternoon, a detective laid a folder in front of her. Inside were photos of the 3 children from her father's secret family, now adults. One of them, a man named Michael, had disappeared years ago, the missing person from the file she'd seen on the drive. Your father believed Michael was killed to send him a message, the detective explained. That's why he started documenting everything. He was building a safety net for you, even if he didn't survive. Claire felt her chest tighten. Her father hadn't been perfect, but in his own flawed way, he had been trying to protect her all along. It was a truth as painful as it was comforting. The detective leaned back in his chair. "We're taking this to court, and we'll need you to testify about how you found all of this. You may be the last piece we need to bring them down." Claire nodded slowly, her stomach twisting with fear. The thought of facing those powerful people in court terrified her. But after everything she'd been through, she knew there was no other choice. She whispered to herself more to gather courage. "Than anything else, I won't let them scare me into silence. Not like they did to him." The courthouse was buzzing with tension the morning Claire arrived to testify. She walked through the metal detectors, flanked by 2 officers, the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on her. Whispers followed her down the hall. People had read the headlines about the principal with 2 lives and his daughter holding the key to the case. Inside the courtroom, she saw them, the men from the photographs on her father's flash drive. They sat in dark suits, their expressions calm but their eyes sharp, calculating. A shiver ran down her spine as one of them leaned back and gave her a slow, knowing smile. When her name was called, Claire stepped up to the witness stand. Her legs trembled, but her voice stayed steady as she swore the oath. She clutched the edge of the wooden stand, remembering every sleepless night, every terrifying moment since she'd opened that journal. The prosecutor guided her gently through the story. She described finding the hidden drawer, reading the journal, and the night the black SUV appeared outside her home. She could feel the defendant's eyes on her, but she didn't waver. Then came the defense attorney's cross-examination. He tried to paint her as paranoid, a grieving daughter inventing conspiracies. But Claire met his gaze and said, "I'm not paranoid. I'm alive because I listened to the warnings my father left behind." The courtroom murmured at her words. For a moment, Claire felt her father's presence beside her, as if he were silently proud. This was what he had prepared her for passing on the truth he couldn't speak in life. When she stepped down from the stand, she caught the eye of the man who had smiled at her earlier. His smirk was gone, replaced by something called a realization. He understood now that the silence they had forced on her father had ended with her. Claire returned to her seat, heart racing, but she felt lighter than she had in months. Speaking the truth out loud had broken the invisible chains that fear had wrapped around her. Whatever came next, she knew she had done her part. The final day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was overflowing. Reporters filled every available seat, and the buzz of whispered speculation hung in the air. Claire sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, waiting for the verdict that would decide if her father's truth would finally matter. The prosecutor delivered a powerful closing statement, holding up the worn leather journal as if it were sacred. "This man," he said, pointing toward the defendants, "thought he could silence Henry Thompson forever. But this journal gave his daughter the courage to speak, and today his voice will be heard." When the jury returned, the room fell. Silent, Claire could feel her heart pounding in her throat. One by one, the foreperson read the verdicts guilty on all major counts: conspiracy, witness intimidation, and accessory to murder. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Claire exhaled shakily, tears welling in her eyes. After months of fear, running, and doubt, justice had finally broken through the darkness her father had lived under for decades. He hadn't died in vain. As the judge announced the sentences, decades behind bars for each of the men, the weight that had pressed on Claire's chest for so long began to lift. She looked toward the row of convicted men. Some glared at her, but their power was gone. Her father's secret family had also attended the trial in quiet support. After the verdict, one of the daughters, her half-sister, approached her, eyes full of tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved us all from living in fear forever." Claire realized then that her father's hidden life had been a tragedy, but it had also forged an unexpected bond between the families he left behind. For the first time, she felt a strange, fragile sense of closure. As the courtroom emptied, the sun streamed through the high windows, catching in the dust-filled air. Claire tilted her head back slightly, as if letting her father see through her eyes. "It's over, Dad," she whispered to herself. "You can rest now." And that brings us to the end of Claire's story. A simple journal, hidden in her father's desk, unraveled a lifetime of secrets and exposed a network of lies that had haunted her family for decades. By finding the courage to speak, Claire gave her father the justice he never had in life. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It waits patiently for someone brave enough to uncover it. And when it finally comes to light, it can bring both pain and freedom. I want you to imagine yourself in Claire's shoes for a moment. Could you have kept reading that journal? Could you have faced the danger and the darkness to reveal the truth? Or would fear have kept you silent? If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I received countless letters filled with stories of betrayal, hidden secrets, and survival, and your engagement helps me decide which ones to share next. Tell me in the comments. Would you want to uncover a family secret if you knew it might change your life forever? Your thoughts and stories matter more than you think. And if you have a story of your own, one that you're finally ready to share, my inbox is always open. Your story might be the one that someone else needs to hear. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for supporting this community of truth and courage. I'm Brenda, and I'll be back soon with another letter. Until then, stay safe, and never ignore the whispers of your instincts.